Hello and welcome to Medieval Dynasty. Well, as you can see, we've actually now got the full version. So the game came out in early access. There's a lot of changes going on as you would expect, but now we've actually got the full release, so there won't be any significant changes to affect your gameplay. There are actually going to be additions added. The actual game developers are going to add more content as time goes by, but it just means that there's no significant changes. And what they did suggest is, like, early on, just before they actually announced this new release, was that yes, you've got previous saves, but the advice was don't load those saves. You could potentially do it, but don't actually continue from where you left off in an alpha version. To me, it actually makes sense because I've had a bit of a play with the full release, and there are some changes they've made, and the storyline's changed a bit as well, slightly. So for me, it's a case of I'm going to start a completely new game. So this is going to be Season 2 for me. Season 1 was in alpha. Season 2 is the full release version. We'll see how things go, because I haven't specifically said how often they're going to release content. At least I haven't seen that. Maybe they're just going to add new things as we go along. Maybe every 3 months, month. I honestly don't know. But we should at least be able to keep the game going. So what I've done, if I go over to settings, is I haven't really changed anything in terms of the gameplay except these two options here. So I can toggle the sprint option here. So the idea is, rather than me having to hold down the sprint key, I just have to press it once and my character will just keep sprinting until they run out of stamina, basically, or until I just press that key again. I get the same with a crouch, which I'm much like that option, just to toggle it. I don't know why devs just don't seem to be offering you the option to toggle the walk as well. I mean, this is a pretty big map and you're going to be doing a lot of walking and a lot of running around, and I would love to have something like that, but they don't give you it for some strange reason. So I'm running auto hotkey, I think it is, so I've actually got it toggled to my F2 and F3 keys, so my character can actually walk, and I just have to press F2 and my character will just keep walking until I press F3. So that's my way of getting around it. But yeah, they're the only two options I've changed. I mean, some people like to turn that option off, head bobbing. If you're a bit averse to blood, you can disable that as well. As far as the graphics go, I've just cranked it up maximum, right up to ultra. Only thing I'll point out for myself is that I'm actually running this with VSync disabled. The reason for that is I'm actually streaming this game from another computer. So the game's running on a computer in another room, one that's got much more beefier graphical processor, graphics card on it than the one I'm playing it on. And also because, well, I'm playing it on my recording studio. So my computer that I'm doing all my recording on, it's actually streaming that game over to this computer. And if I don't disable the VSync, I do tend to see tears. I've got some games that I've released where it's a case of you might see the actual tears going a lot more because the game's playing a lot faster on that other computer than this computer can push out to its own monitor. So you get these tears. So now what I'm doing is I'm running it on that computer with VSync disabled on that side, so it's going at its whatever rate it can go at. When it gets over to this computer, VSync's enabled on this side, so that should make it go a lot more smoother. All the rest pretty much the same, just the defaults. The sound, I must admit, I'm down to 15%. I still think the sound's a bit high, I must admit. So I'm going to crank that down a bit, see if that'll help. So what I want to do is start a new game, but rather than just going with the defaults, it does actually give you this option where you can customize the game settings. So if we click on that, to be honest, I'm just going with the default settings, but there's quite a lot of things you can change in here. So for example, I mean, you've got different difficulty levels. The way the game plays is there are 3 days in a season. Once you get to the end of that day, you move on to the next season. I mean, there is a temptation to sort of increase the number of days, because sometimes you find there's just not enough time to get things done. So especially because the farming, for example, or you want to get all the quests done, and it's a case of you just can't get around the map quickly enough to do all of your farming, all of your quests and so on. So there might be, there is a bit of a temptation there, I must admit, to increase the number of days per season. My only concern, though, is that later on in the game, once I'm fully established and I've got the NPCs doing most of the work, well, I'm then going to be stuck because you can't change these. Once you've actually, decided what these settings are, you're stuck with them for the end until you finish the game. And I don't want to be in a situation where I've got 5 days in a season and I've got next to nothing to do, in which case I've got to sit around twiddling my thumbs because I've got to wait until about 9 o'clock in the evening at least before I can end the day. So I'm just going to leave that on the default. Taxes you can change if you want, so you either pay less taxes or more taxes. Building limits, they've suggested just leave it on the default. Yes, you can have more buildings to be able to be made. The only trouble is it puts more load on your computer, so that's why you've got like a tooltip down in there in the bottom left where it's saying we really don't recommend you do it. The events, that's to do with when you transition from one season to another. I think there's like a random chance you'll get an event pop up, and that can have adverse impact on your gameplay, because you might find, like, for example, you lose some money, or your villagers might take a drop in morale, or you might have things stolen, you might have a lot of buildings damaged and so on. So if you don't want that sort of thing, then you can disable it. And the game it's really a survival game. So you've got these choices here where if all you're interested in is just the crafting, building the villages, you're just not interested in the survival side of it, you can disable these things. You can make life a lot easier for yourself. For example, enable an unlimited weight if you want. But for me, it's a very interactive game, so I quite like the limitations of it. It seems to be a pretty good balance to me, so I'm just going to leave those as is. And you've also got a choice where you can actually make the game more difficult by increasing the needs of your inhabitants, or you can make it easier by reducing them. So there's a certain amount of food that your villagers are going to need every day. There's a certain amount of water they need, which I must point out is new. You didn't have that in early access. And there's also a certain amount of wood they'll need every day. So it's a case of either you've got to keep up with those demands, or you've got to have other NPCs that do with that. So they're giving you the option, I must admit, which is quite useful if you want. It gives you quite a bit of flexibility to play around with the game, to experience it in a different way. We've also now actually got bandits, which is interesting. I did notice in the early access playthrough that there were some little camps dotted around. Little fires, for example, or beds, and they were empty. But now what they've done is they've actually introduced this new feature into the game, which is the full release, where these camps are going to be occupied by bandits. So you could be just out there in the woods. I mean, it's bad enough now when you're going up against the wolves. I'm finding the wolves are more difficult, the Wyson and the boar, and a lot more difficult than they were in early access. The bears as well, for that matter. But now you've got bandits, so you could be wandering around in there, through the forest, for example, running to bandits, and now you've got NPCs to deal with. So if you don't want that, you can always disable it. But yeah, I must admit that first time I came across some, it was like, ooh, run away. I just wasn't ready for them. So they're not, as far as I'm aware, they don't actually attack your village, for example. There's nothing like that in the game. Maybe there's something they might introduce and it would be interesting, but for now, these are bandits you're going to encounter out on the map, so I'm just going to leave that as for now. Poisoning, if you want, you can disable that. Again, go back into this, survival sort of thing. You can actually die. And that is one of the key points of the game. Is it's called Medieval Dynasty because the idea is, well, you're going to die at some point, so you may as well, pass your dynasty on. It is kind of like hardcore in the sense that if your character dies, that's it. That's the end of the game. But in theory, if you've got an heir, if you die, you can pass your dynasty on to the next generation. So there's things like, poisoning you've got to deal with. There's temperature extremes that you've got to deal with. So if you don't want those, again, if you're just interested in the crafting, for example, you can disable them. We've also got this extra feature, which is fast crafting. Now for me, I'm just going to leave that turned off because whenever you're crafting things, if you've got enough resources, you can actually make, multiple items. So for example, if you've got enough items to make, say, 10 axes, normally what would happen is you'd go into like the crafting wheel and say, oh well, I want to make 10 axes, and what it'll do is it'll go through this little loop. You see like a little timer where it makes axe number 1, then goes back through the loop, makes number 2, number 3, and so on. They're giving you this option actually here where you can actually disable that and just put that all into one go. So it's kind of similar to if you want 1 axe, it'll take, that's it, just one crafting period. Whereas if you want 10 axes and you've got that enabled, it's just 1 crafting period. So I'm leaving that disabled because there are skills that your character can get to actually speed up crafting. And so it's a case, I think that would kind of spoil the gameplay. So I'm just going to leave that as disabled. For a similar reason, I don't want to be messing around with the XP technology or the dynasty reputation, because I think that'll make the game a bit too quick. It'll end too quickly. There's a certain shelf of about 10,000 for your experience in skills, your experience in technology, and once you hit that, that's it. There's nothing else pretty much to do except probably go around and do side quests, I'd imagine. So I don't particularly want the game to end too quickly, because it's a very interactive game and I really do enjoy it. So for that reason, I'm not going to touch these. They are a challenge, I must admit, but I quite like that. And then similar with the dynasty reputation, that kind of governs how many villagers you can recruit. So personally, I just want to leave that as is, because I was only on much later in the game that I actually ran into difficulties recruiting anybody because I didn't have enough dynasty reputation. So I'm just going to leave that as is, because I think it's just to do with how many actual villages you've got in total. My playthrough this time is to actually try and stop all these villagers breeding, basically, and I think that might help deal with the problem. But we shall find out. We shall find out. So, yep, all these are just going to be on the defaults. In which case, it's time to start a new life.
I used to have a simple life. Whatever needed doing round the farm, I'd do it. Being the eldest son, it's tough. But at least we had a living, and our plates were never empty. Then, the war came. I lost everything overnight. The last thing I remember is Father pushing me away, yelling for me to run, to live. At first, I didn't know what to do. Then, I remembered. A story my mother once told me. A story about my uncle, Jordan. He made a modest fortune up north, in a peaceful valley far away from the war. For weeks I held on to that thought, until the valley from my mother's stories. I could see it. This is where I can start a new life.
Yeah, I just waited for that little intro there. So, we start off in the game up here. So, good thing is we've got a little personal icon, a little mouse pointer, if you will, to show us where we are on the map. And it is a pretty big map. There's no plans for the devs to increase the map. From what they're explaining, it's a case of you'll just end up with, you know, like a big map, and they'll have to find something to fill the content with, basically. If you add more content, it just adds to the load on your computer. So for that reason, there's no particular plans to make the map any bigger. And I must admit, it is a big map anyway. Getting from, say, like if I build a village out here, and I've got to get all the way down to Honecker on foot, it takes forever. So, I do quite like that, at least to tell you where you are on the map. I'm going to give you the cursor, or compass, so like up on the top of the screen, as I move around, you can see it's telling us what direction we're pointing in. And the way the map's set up is you've got, I think most of it takes place around this northern area. Then you've just got these two villages down in the south. So there's not a great deal we can do until we go and see the castellan, as it says. That's the first thing. We've been given a task. If I go into the journal, You can see we've got a series of chapters. So this is kind of like the main game, kind of like a tutorial, if you will. So we've actually got to go and talk to the castellan. So it's saying we're at the stage of hermit where we can only build but one building at the moment. Although interesting enough, if I go into the crafting wheel, if I press Q, you can see things are locked out. I can make tools, for example. That's not a problem, but if I want to build anything, I can't. It's saying you need the permission of the castellan to do it. So even though it's an open world game, there are some limitations. So there are, this limits, I should say, on how many buildings you can make at any given time. You've really got to be doing the tutorial to a certain extent in order to be able to progress. But it is pretty much an open world game. And for that reason, I'm going to pop around here to the corner. Now, on this particular playthrough, there is no actual cart, I've noticed. Sometimes what happens is you get these random carts pop up. Now, on this playthrough, it hasn't showed up, which is a bit of a pain. I mean, it is tempting to reload the game, but I'm just going to play it as is. I'm just going to take, whatever comes my way. So normally what would happen is most of the time a cart turns up here and it's got things like a copper sickle and a hat, but, well, it isn't there, so we're not going to have one. So rather than keep that button pressed down, I'm just going to toggle my character. So my character is just walking on their own, basically. I don't have to touch anything, but I can just press the shift key now because I've got that toggled and the character's sprinting. So you'll see how the character, the stamina, green is stamina, that's going down. So you've only got a certain amount of stamina. Once you run out of stamina, your character will just stop, or then they'll slow down, I should say. And you'll get to the point where it'll speed up, they'll get a bit more stamina, it'll keep sprinting again. So it's quite amusing, I must admit. Another thing to bear in mind is you can actually take fall damage. So your health is in red. Let's see if I can do this. There's a certain point if I jump. There you go. So you can see my health, which is in red, has gone down. And it is quite useful, the game. It does tell you about things. I mean, you can press the tab key and it goes into the knowledge. It gives you details and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, it's something to bear in mind because it's a survival game. You've got to keep an eye on your stamina and on your health. Over on the right hand side, we've got an orange bar, which is your food levels. So you've got to keep yourself fed. Then over on the right, we've got a blue bar, which is our water levels. So we've got to keep ourselves hydrated. But the first thing we've got to do is go and see the castellan. Now, one thing I'll point out is you can see if you look on the compass, it shows you where vendors are, which is very, very useful. So you can see that one there where there's somebody actually moving around. They actually sell... This is somebody who actually sells food because they're a cook. So this is a sort of kitchen that you can make to make your own food. Over there we've got a vendor who sells cows. Over there you can probably just about make out there's a vendor who sells beer. So that's where the tavern is. So they actually sell quite a lot of food. So there's a tavern here in Gostovius, and they do sell quite a lot of good food. Then over there we've got an icon showing basically sort of like a crop with a bag. So that's a vendor who's selling seeds and grains. And then we've got a little icon for a person. Now that is actually an NPC. So that's somebody who you can recruit. But until you even get started with our village, we can't do that sort of stuff. So first things first, we've got to go and find the castellan. So the active quest that you've got, if I go back into the quest menu, you can actually make a certain quest the active quest. At the moment I've only got one, but once it's showing you which one it is, it highlights it, you've got this big yellow exclamation mark and it's kind of like flashing, if you will. So it kind of tries to make it a lot easier for it to point out where you need to be going. So I need to find, there's Unigost over there. So Unigost's the castellan, he's the one who takes in all the taxes. And we're going to have to speak to him to get started. Okay, so oddly enough, he seems to, I think he's took a bit of a shock because he's seen us and he thinks as, oh, well, haven't I seen you before? And what you can do, actually, you don't necessarily have to click on these options. You can just press the number for your responses. Most of the responses are just the same anyway, but Yeah, so he by the looks of it, Unigust is somebody who knows our Uncle Jordan. I mean, I'm not going to dwell on the actual all the feedback, to be honest. If you want to do that, that's entirely up to yourself. But it's a long storyline, you'll find out. So he's recognising us as Jordan's nephew, and that's what we've done. Is we've got basically turfed out of our village because of a war, and we've come over here looking for a new life. As we heard, our Uncle Jordan came over in this direction. So he recognises who we are anyway, but as he says, he never actually met our mother. He knows of her, but he hasn't ever met her. Okay. Ah, yes, and as he's pointed out is the fact that, yeah, our parents probably got killed because we just left. So chances are our parents and the rest of our family were killed. And then depending on your response there, it's going to be a case of how you react to it, I suppose. But I haven't seen that taking any particular effect, to be honest. Anyways, what about our Uncle Jordan? We're supposed to come to see him, see if he can help. Oh dear. Unfortunately, he died. So that's no good. Well, that's it. We're the only person left. That's terrible. Okay, so like he says, what can we do about this then? What do we do? So he's basically saying that we're in this valley and we can actually go out and build our own village. We can build our own buildings and we can create our own dynasty. All we've got to do is pay for the actual taxes on them. That's it. So the actual land, you can go anywhere on this map, create villages wherever you like. You don't even have to just create one. So you can have like a mining village, you could have a fishing village, whatever you like. That doesn't seem, as long as you don't build too close to another village, that's the only restriction. And then it's just a case of, can you afford to keep it all going? Can you afford to keep feeding everybody? Can you afford all the taxes that go with it and so on? So like as he points out, I mean, it's starting off where there's just us, but we can actually go and recruit people to help us build up villages. So yeah, so like you're saying there, we do have to pay for the tax on any buildings, even the farms now. We didn't have to pay taxes on farms, now we do. So he's just basically saying, go and grab some rocks, grab some sticks, make yourself an axe, chop your trees down, get yourself some logs, make a hammer out of those, and then you can start building things. And then once you've actually built your own house, come back and see him. As it says, basically we can go around, we can pick up stones, we can chop down trees, we can pick up sticks and so on. You can get more details if you press tab. You can see the little paper icon next to him because he's the castle and he's the one we've got to pay taxes to. So we're going through this like tutorial here. So this is the start effectively, where we've been given a quest to do certain things and we'll get rewards. So in this particular case, we'll get a 10 dynasty reputation, but we'll also get our building limit increased to 5. So at the minute on management, you can see we can only have one building. So we've got to, in order to progress beyond that and start building a village, we've got to complete this. Pretty easy, just a case of collect 10 sticks and 10 stone. The reason for doing that is we need that to actually make our first axe. Now, there is an option on here which is called the inspector mode. If you press the Alt key, it goes into inspector mode. Now, it does consume your stamina. By default, it doesn't do a great deal. It tells you about people. It highlights people, gives you a bit more information. Somebody that's got an exclamation mark above their head is somebody that's got a task. The good thing is, if you have a look around on the map, you'll see these little exclamation marks. So these are people who have got tasks, and tasks I've found are extremely useful. They'll be able to get your technology, for instance. You get certain amounts of points needed in technology, and there's 4 different technologies. There's one for building, one for farming, for survival, one for farming, and one for production. Every time you do certain things, like for production, it's saying crafting items, cooking and so on, you get points, and once you build up a certain number of points, it unlocks a schema. Once you've got a schema, so for example this one here, once we get to 10 points, we'll be able to build a workshop, for instance. So there are people out there who have got quests that will actually reward you much quicker than you'll get from actually producing things, I've found. So there's a big incentive to do quests. But it also highlights, for example, these NPCs. So this is a traveller, if you will. And you can see this is the person who's highlighted in the compass. You see that little person up there. If we hold down the Alt key, you'll see their skills. Each one has a certain number against it. Maximum I've seen is 3. So really what we're looking for are people who have got level 3 in a certain skill, and it just depends on what we want them to do within our village. But anyhow, I'm getting distracted. I've got choices here where I can either get sticks from these little tree saplings, but there's also sticks lying around on the floor. Now the trouble is I've found is that there's only one stick. If you pick up a stick off the floor, there's only one stick. If you go into one of these tree saplings, you'll actually get more of them. So if we hold the E key down, we've got 2 there, then we've got 3 there, then we've got 2 sticks there, now we've got another 3. So we've actually reached that requirement for 10 sticks, and I like the way it's taking that requirement up. So now the chapter's saying all we need is 2. So I really like that. It makes life a bit easier. But yeah, you basically just hold the E key down for these sort of things. But for something like a stone, for example, which is lying on the floor, you just press the E key once and it picks that stone up. So now what it's doing, it's progressing on, and it's saying, oh, well, you need to build an axe next. So if we go and hit Q, this brings up our crafting wheel. What we want is handcrafting, and we want to select that option, which is to build an axe. So I'll select that, and you can see the little timer going around. Now, if I'd had the option to make 10 of those axes, you'd see it going around 10 times. So that's why I was saying on that option before, in the gameplay settings, where you can have a fast crafting option that would all go in one go. Anyhow, now that I've got an axe, it's automatically equipped the axe, which is interesting, and it's put it into quick slot 1. What it means is, if I press key number 1, it's automatically, basically equipping it and unequipping it in our hands, if you will. You can also press the R key, same thing. But we've got to equip it to actually use it. So I'll go over to the tree here, because it's saying we need to make a hammer. We need to chop down 5 trees, and we need to find 32 straw as well. Now, if we go into the actual quest requirements, it's actually saying we actually need to build our first house. So the trouble is, there's no incentive, even though there's these trees here, there's no incentive to chop these specific ones down, because it's all going to weigh us down. So we've got to find somewhere, pick somewhere on this map to actually start building our village. We need to build our own house to begin with. If I go into the crafting wheel now, you can see some of these options are available. If I go into houses, this is now available. Before, these were locked out because of the castellan. Now they're locked out because you need a certain amount of technology points to unlock the schema. But as I say, really I've got to find somewhere to build an actual village. So there's all sorts of different places you can go, and the good thing I like about it is there's no restriction really. I don't have to just build a village and that's it, I'm stuck with it. I can actually build a village and I can have like many little outposts, if you will. That's the way I'm liking to play it. So on this particular playthrough, I'm actually going to start off with a pretty simple village to begin with. I'm going to expand that out, and then I'm going to start expanding out and building other villages, and I'm even eventually probably going to drop this village at some point and rebuild it somewhere else, because you can build houses, for example, and then you can build better houses later on. You can upgrade them and so on, but I've got to start with something. Now, when we're actually just getting started, most of the things I'm doing are actually down in Gostovia. I've got to keep coming back here to pay taxes at spring. There's some major quests going on down in Gostovia. Now the problem is, if I were to build, say like a village down here, for example, that's a long distance to keep coming back. I'll get something done, then it'll be a case of I've got to go and talk to Unigost, for example, or there's somebody else in here I need to talk to. So I'm just going with a Goldilocks effect here, to be honest, and I'm just going to build a little village around this area because it's in a pretty good area. I'm very close to Gostovia. Over in Dernica over here, I think it's Denica, that's it. Over in Denica, oh, you can actually scroll in if you want. Over in Denica, there's a seamstress over here. In Gostovia, we've got people who are selling all sorts of things. If we can't get our farming stuff from here, we can get it from Rolnica, for example. If we can't get our sewing stuff from here in Denica, we can get it over in, I think it's, yeah, in Branica. We've got a hunter over in Tutki over there. So by being here, we're actually close to most of the villages already. Whereas if I'd built down here, I'd be struggling, I think. So I've got more of an incentive to start here. So that's where we're going first. So I'm just going to toggle some things there. So my character's just running along. I'll just put the axe away. But it's saying that we need to make a hammer. We need to chop down 5 trees. And we need to get 32 straw. So these are pretty much all of the resources to get ourselves a hammer and then start at least getting the actual building going. So we're running out of stamina already. So what's going to happen is that our character actually just starts to walk. Interestingly enough, because we toggled the sprint, once our stamina goes up to a certain level, they start sprinting again. And then they start walking, and then they start sprinting again. But I'm just going to turn the toggle off, just to let our stamina get back up again. But if we want any food at this stage, we're kind of stuck. We'll have to buy it, really, because there's no... Although down here we've got berries. We're in the spring and the berries are not ripe. They're sticks, by the way, where it's just one stick. If I pick that up, that's it. It's just a stick. So I find it's better to get the sticks from the tree saplings. We can pick up mushrooms. I don't know why you've got to hold the E key down for mushrooms, but if I go into mushrooms, it actually gives us poison. So it's not always that much of an incentive. Now, what I'm actually going to do, I'm just going to head over to this bridge here because I can see there's 2 barrels over here. If I have a look in the barrel, these seedlings are worth a lot of money. If you go and buy a seedling, I know when I was playing it in alpha, that they were worth about like 260 each. We get some free grain as well. So if we were to sell these seedlings, we'll get about 160. That's their worth, but we'll actually sell them for less back to the vendor. If we buy them off the vendor, they're worth a heck of a lot more, I must admit. Anyway, I need to pick somewhere. So what I'm going to do, as I say, it's kind of like a Goldilocks effect. This place is, it just seems to be the right place to at least get started. Okay, running out of water, so it's warning us. So what we can do is just go down to the river here and drink out of the river. There you go. So that gets our water sorted out. But I like this place because it gives us access to these types of trees. These trees here are maple trees. If we chop down one of these, we'll actually get 4 wood. If I go to these trees here, these are birch trees. If I chop one of those down, you get 2 wood. And if I can find a one, yeah, right over there, we've got spruce trees. If I chop one of those down, we get 3 wood. So there's more of an incentive to chop down the maple trees because you're getting the same sort of like wear on the axe, for example. We'll have to keep making more axes. Oh, jeez, Louise, that freaked me out. That's a badger. Fortunately, it doesn't attack you. But we've got moose over there. I think somewhere around here I've seen deer and I've seen the hogs. There's rabbits as well. But we've got this big area here where we've got berries. Now, when we get to the summer, we'll be able to harvest these berries, for example. So I do quite like this area. It's reasonably flat, so you know it's a good enough place to actually do your farming, for example. And then down here by the river, right over here, this is where we can actually get our straw. So we harvest reeds. It actually asks for straw, but if we harvest these, it gets us the straw that we're looking for. And it needs 32. Each house that you build needs 32 straw. Oh, there's some barrels there as well. That was handy. So we'll just grab all of this. And that gets us all of our straw. Have a quick peek in these barrels. Oh, there's some flour there. And some flax. Oh, that's good. So what I found is on the rivers, you tend to find things like washed up barrels and sometimes just bags that have got things like that in them. So they're quite useful. But first thing I need to do is I need to chop a tree down. So I'm going to start chopping these maple trees down. So I've got to equip my actual axe. Every time we hit the tree, it starts taking damage. So you can see there's like a little icon of the axe down in the bottom right hand corner, and it's just wearing out. As we get better tools, you know, we progress from like stone into copper, into bronze, and finally into iron. They'll have much better durability. So the idea is we've got to chop a tree down, then we've got to chop it again, and that clears off the sticks. So we actually end up getting some sticks and some feather when we chop trees down. The feathers are used for making arrows. But as you can see, we actually got 4 logs from that. Now you do get a stump left behind, and it's saying that you need a shovel to remove that stump. If you're actually going to be building around here, then it makes sense to remove it. If not, you'll want to leave it, because what will happen is the tree will grow back after, I think it's about 2 years. So we'll just chop these trees down. Now the thing is, our stamina's going down as we're doing this. So that's something to bear in mind, is if you get into a sort of like a routine of chopping a lot of things down, it'll actually wear you out. Now, I don't necessarily have to pick up all of those logs. Somewhere... Well, I'm just wondering if that... I'm sure that was a maple stump, but I've only got 7 logs. Oh, there it is. If I hold down the inspector mode key, you can see it's highlighting where that log went to. So I've now got 8 logs. If I go into the wheel, for crafting, I can select houses. Now, we've got choices. You start off where you can build a simple house, then you get a small simple house, which can hold 3 people. So that's, as it shows you down the bottom, that's like a double bed and 2 single beds. As you progress and get better, you'll be able to build a simple house that has 2 doubles and a single, a double bed and 2 single beds. And then you get into the house itself, which is a lot better, but you're looking at 7,500 technology for that. So we're a long way off of these. So there is an incentive for something like these, because what you find is you'll get better morale from your NPCs from these sort of houses than you will from these. But you've got to start somewhere. So once I select that, it's given me an option of where to place it. Now I can't build it on the main road. Wherever there are obstacles, it's in red. So if we go back to where our trees were, for example, I can't build it here because we've got these stumps in the way. So if I do want to build here, I'm going to have to get a shovel and remove the stump. But if I want the tree to grow back, on the other hand, I need to leave the stump there. So what I can do is I can move it out to here. I'm going to build it out here on just off the main road, because I'm really just getting started anyway. This is just a kind of like a starting post, because it's, as I say, it's kind of like a Goldilocks effect for me. It's just close to where I need to be most of the time. So we place that down, and that gives us kind of like an out frame, if you will. And we've got to basically add to it. So we've got a frame here, but it's not complete. So what we're going to need, it says, is a hammer. Now I've noticed it's getting late, so you're going to have to bear with me, because as it gets late, it's going to get dark. And it's going to make the game extremely difficult to see. I can see it, but I can already tell it's getting difficult to see. So that's a bit of a pain. I'll equip the torch. Just double click that. And you can see a bit better, but it's, I mean, for me it's not too bad, but when it comes out on the video it's extremely dark. But what I'm going to do, oh yeah, it's saying it's getting on to 7 o'clock and suggesting I sleep. I've spent so much time talking about this that I've lost quite a bit of time. But as it's, yep, okay, we need food as well. It's taking that long, we're almost most of the way through the day, but I've got to get this place built. So I'm going to grab some sticks. because what I need to do is to make this hammer, and the hammer needs one log and 10 sticks. So tell it to make a hammer. Now it doesn't automatically equip that, so I'm going to pop that into slot number 3. So I've just highlighted that, press 3, and then I can actually equip it on me. Now you can see you've got this like ghostly outline showing you where all of the different parts need to be added, and you need the actual building hammer to do that. So you can see there it said it needed 1 log and 8 straw. I'm just holding the mouse key down and it'll just automatically start adding to it. It's better than what it was in the alpha. In the alpha version it used to kind of hit 1 extra time. You have to time all of this. Now you just hold the mouse key down and it'll do that. So as long as you've got the resources on you, it's fine, to be honest. So we'll get a little roof done, seeing as I'm already holding all of the straw that I need. One thing I'll point out is you can actually change the actual type of roof, the type of wall, the type of window, and so on. If you press the E key, it gives you a choice of roofs. So you can actually do just straw one, otherwise you can do a wooden one, otherwise you can do a wooden tile one, and these are all better. That one's better than the thatch one, that one's better than just the wooden one. You get better insulation and that makes your villagers happier, but we're not at the point of making any planks anyway, which is why I'm just doing the thatch. You can see we still need a log for that, so I'm going to have to chop more trees down. So I've got enough sticks here, so each of these needs a different amount of sticks. What you can do with these is you can also change these. So for example, at the moment this is just a wall. If I press the E key, I can change it, so instead of being a wall, for example, I can make it a window. I can even change it to a door, but the trouble is you have to have a door. One thing I'll point out, at least what I found in the alpha, is that when you build this, if you move the door, the chest actually ended up always being in the same place, and sometimes I found it wasn't, it was causing me a bit of a problem, so I tend not to move the door. You could do, but I don't really see much point, to be honest. But you can change the number of windows, so like if this is a window and you want to make it a wall, you can make it a wall. That's a wall. If you want to make it a window, make it a window. Pretty easy to do. By default, we're making basically are just walls and windows out of a wall. So it's just basically weaving the sticks together. But if I press that, I've got a choice. So this is a wall. So if I select the wall option, I've got a choice of just the original, which is a wattle one. So that's just our sticks. I can make it a wooden one, which will be better insulated, or we can go all the way over to stone. So there are choices that we've got here, but for now I'm just going to stick with the basic wattle walls just so I can get things progressing. Because the plan is I'm going to move anyway. So if I want to change these later on, what I can do is, while you've got the hammer equipped, if you right click, it gives you options of what you want to do with that hammer. So by default it's just building. You've got options for repairing, and you will have to repair things. That's another thing to point out. With this being a wattle wall, it's going to need more repairs than, say, like a stone wall, for example. But another option is to destroy items as well. So I can always build this as a wattle wall, and then later on I'll be able to destroy it and then replace it with like a wooden wall or a stone wall. It's pretty flexible in what you can do. The one thing I can't do though is I can't rebuild this so that instead of having a simple small house, I've got a small house. That's something I can't do. You can insulate the walls to make them better as well. That's another option. But for now, as I say, I just need to get started. So because it's dark, I'm just going to pause there. I'm just going to keep chopping the trees down. You can sleep and it'll just take you straight into the next day. That's one option. It'll also heal you as well a little. But you can actually just work your way through the night if you like. It's entirely up to you. Doesn't really have any particular adverse effects, I've noticed, so for that reason I'm just going to keep chopping these trees down, get my little building, my little house here finished, then we'll pick up from there. Right then, so last part of the house to actually build. I mean, because I've actually managed to gather all of those items, it actually progressed on. If I have a look at this chapter, You see we progressed where you had to collect chop down 5 trees, gather 32 straw and make a hammer. As soon as I did all that, it moved on, so now it's a case of you need to build your first house. So what I need to do, I'll just hit that and we'll get the house built, and then it should complete that bit. So we've completed chapter 1, and as Unigo said, we're going to go and talk to his wife next. If we have a look over here though, because we've been chopping things down and gathering sticks and so on, we've actually gained enough experience to actually put a point into survival. Now, you've got choices, and personally I'd just go with the survival knowledge. Insensitive or iron liver, at this stage I wouldn't see much use for them. I mean, they can be useful. I mean, you know, a better tolerance to the temperatures, definitely useful for the winter. Iron liver, as long as I'm not eating any slate mushrooms, I'm not too fussed. So I want to put that into survival knowledge, because now what will happen is every time I chop down trees, gather you know, berries, food, sticks, stones, whatever, I'll get an extra 5% in experience each time. Now the thing is, these are all tiers, so these are tier 1 skills. So if I put a point into that, I do like that. It gives you the option, I mean, you can confirm that you do want to do that. I'll select that, and then by taking a point in tier 1, it opens up tier 2, so that's quite useful. We don't have to like fill all of like tier 1 up to get to tier 2. We just had to put 1 point into tier 1, and now we're going to be able to progress into tier 2. But the good thing is, as we've actually now got a house, so if I go into here, one other thing to point out is they've actually made this a bit easier as well. Outside of your house, you've got like a little signpost, or signboard it's called. You can actually select that, and it allows you to manage the house. If we go into our management tab, that's another option. If we press M, we'll go into map. We just go into the management tab. We can manage a lot of different things in here. So for example, here under housing and buildings, we could have managed the house there, but by having this little signboard here, we can now do it for each individual building. So if there was a specific building that I wanted to move somebody to, I could go to that building and pick that specific building, whereas on here I've got, you know, I could have a long list of buildings, and I've got to find that specific building out of all of these buildings here. Now I can just go right up to that specific building and pick who's actually going to live there, for example. You get that same with all the other types of buildings you make. So to me it makes life a lot easier. But inside we've got ourselves a double bed, we've got a single bed, we've got a chest. So this is our personal chest, so we can keep things in here. So for example, if I have a look in here, there's nothing wonderful jumps out for me to keep here, but I'm going to keep my trees, because these are pretty expensive, I must admit, so I'm definitely going to keep them there. Rather than keep carrying these things around, I can't do anything with them yet, so I'll just keep them there. Another thing we get is a cauldron. So if we select that, it gives you all these different recipes. You start off with these ones, but until you're into the farming, it's not, you can't really touch those. But what you can do is, if you go to the stone campfire, you can actually use that to start cooking meat, for example. So if I press E on that, we can actually cook meat. We'll be able to cook fish once we get fish. So that's one way to do it. Otherwise you can make your own little fire out in the wilderness. When you get into the winter and it gets cold, you can stand next to an actual campfire like this and warm yourself up. When the campfire runs out, you would turn it back on again. You relight it with your torch. So you always need a torch on you, or you need to be able to get the resources to make one. And these simple ones that I've got, they don't last long. So what I'm going to do, I mean, you can see it's almost midnight, so I'm going to go to sleep. So I've got choices. At the moment, all I can do is really sleep to the next day. I can't sleep to the next season. That option will turn up on the last day. So at the moment we're in spring, so when we get to the last day of spring, this will be the only option I've got. At the moment, for some strange reason, it gives you a choice of 2. Seems a bit odd, but it is what it is. So we can now sleep. So our fire's got out, so I would have to have a torch on me, and it would have to be equipped. At least that's the way it worked last time. Oh, it doesn't do that. So that's better. Before you actually had to equip that simple torch to be able to use it. But you have to relight the campfire if you want to use it. But the main thing is, it's a new day. I did actually find something else out here. There's 2 barrels here. I think there was some flour, some flaxseed, so I'll grab them. Incidentally, what you can do is, if you select an individual item, you've got a choice of F is to transfer one. Well, if I press the F key, it comes up with how many of the items do you want to transfer. If you just hold down the F, it just transfers the whole lot in one go, so that's quite useful, I must admit. But yeah, we've now got ourselves a foothold, and it's just really just to get started. That's the reason I've picked here in particular, because we're just close to Gustavian. We're going to keep going backwards and forwards here for quite a while. So I think that's going to be it for this episode, and the next one we'll pick up from here, which is to go to, technically we want to go over to talk to her, but what I'm actually going to do, I'm actually going to build another house. We'll go over that in the next episode.